All right, all right. Welcome back to Lights Camera Caption, second episode. I wanted to go over this show that I just started. It's called DTF St. Louis. DTF acronym stands for Down to Fuck St. Louis. It is it's super it's different. It's different. It's starring Jason Bateman, David Harbour from Stranger Things. You all know who that is. Um and it's different from your regular affair type of movie. There have been different movies like the movie with Jake Gyllenhaal and Tobey Maguire. I think it was called Brothers or something like that, where he goes off to war, they think he's dead, the brother falls for the wife, type of thing. This is a little different than that. This is a little different from anything that I've seen before. Without further ado, I'm just gonna go into, you know, how the different beats of the show and kind of, expand on what I saw and, what was interesting to me as a filmmaker, writer, actor. Um, and so it starts off, there's a bonding exercise with David Harbour's character, um, whose name is um, Floyd. So Floyd, he's doing a bonding exercise with his stepson. Um, his stepson, he's married to Carol in the film, played by Linda Cardellini. Linda Cardellini, you've seen her before. She's amazing. She is on her game. Like, this might be, to me, in my own opinion, um, might be one of her best performances that I've seen. That but it starts off with this bonding exercise where we're getting a peek into who Floyd is. Floyd, played by David Harbour, and in this bonding exercise, it's definitely guided. So he's clearly put in the effort to go schedule these classes, bring his stepson to these classes. Um, he's going in. The person guiding the exercise is telling them to hug. So Floyd wraps his arms around his stepson, which is Richard. And I say stepson with emphasis because she keeps saying, "Dad, wrap your arms around him," things of that sort. And Richard's like, "Stepdad, stepdad." He keeps correcting her. And they're hugging, and Richard, he's like, "Why do I feel your stomach?" He knows why he feels his stomach. These are the little jabs that he does um towards Floyd. And he's like, um why don't your clothes fit or whatever? And Floyd is he's saying this out loud too, in front of a audience, pretty much. And Floyd, he's not he could take it, he could be defensive about it, and he could, say some things and be mean. But he explains, he's like, "I'm not going to buy bigger clothes because that's a snowball effect," insinuating that if he buys bigger clothes, it's just gonna, you know enable him to keep going on this destructive path, self-destructive path, and get bigger. And he knows that about himself, and so he doesn't buy bigger clothes. He forces himself to get smaller, or that, at least that's the mentality that he feels like he has. And he also emphasizes when he says that, he's like, "I want to lose weight for you. I want to be smaller for you so I can live longer for you." He clearly cares about his stepkid, which is honorable. You know what I mean? It's difficult. It's difficult. And so um as he's holding Richard in his arms, he's reading this letter that he wanted to that I'm assuming the person guiding the exercise had all the parents or step parents, or um whatever the situations they're in, had them write to the children. And at the end of the letter, he's basically going on about how he's strong, he believes in him, and all these things. And at the end of it, he writes, "Love, Dad." But because Richard has the whole time been correcting this guided teacher, saying, stepdad, stepdad. And so at the end of the letter, Floyd wrote, "Love, Dad." Instead, he goes, "Love," contemplates, hesitates, Floyd. It's super sad. You know what I mean? You feel for the guy because he genuinely does care. And the opening scene's giving us insight into who Floyd is. And that for me as a filmmaker, that's a bad sign. When someone is being shown in this great, infallible light, very courageous, very good person, generally something terrible, terrible is about to happen. And so we cut to this weather report where Jason Bateman's character, who is Clark Forrest, he's a weatherman. First day on the job for Floyd. Floyd is working with Clark in a tornado warning. So Clark's trying to give this weather report. It's a tornado warning. It's looking like a hurricane on this video. Um, you know, Clark Forrest asks how Floyd Smyrnich got into sign language. This is after they canceled the report. They had to shut the report down and go to another, end it, um, and then go about their business. And so they're in this retail shop together. It might have even been a library or something like that. But they're both together. Clark asks how Floyd Smyrnich is his last name, how he got into sign language because he's a sign language interpreter for Clark. So when Clark is giving his news report, um, you have Floyd on the side signing so people that are deaf can understand what's going on. And so he asks Floyd how he got into sign language. Floyd answers Peyronie's disease. Peyronie's disease is when you've had trauma to your genitals, your penis, your what's a better word, a less harsh word. Uh there's a word that's not coming to my mind for it. I don't say the word often, obviously, but that that gives your genitals like a curve, you know, and it's called Peyronie's disease. Clark gives the social cue after because he asks, "How did you get into sign language?" And all Floyd says is, "I had Peyronie's disease," and then Clark he looks at him, he gives him the social cue to like explain, please, like tell me more type of thing, and instead of saying anything, Floyd is like he skips the subject and he says something else. But that I want to take a minute to let you guys know that is my type of comedy where it doesn't like it like lets you fill in the blanks of what's going on, you know what I mean? And also I like dry humor, so and Jason Bateman and David Harbour are like a perfect duo for me. But okay. So, cut to the intro. Then the intro comes, and the intro is basically like Jason Bateman and David Harbour doing some dance moves in slow motion. You hear some music going. You see the names popping up here and there, giving us an intro, introduction to the titles of the people that are involved with the show, and then it superimposes for the next scene 2 weeks later. And superimpose just means text on the screen. So the text that you see at the bottom of the screen, it says 2 weeks later, and we're in a community diner. Clark meets Floyd's wife. Um, no, no, no. Sorry, community dinner. uh, Clark meets Floyd's wife. They're at this cornhole thing. They're outside. Um, you see Floyd has this table set up and he's giving out food to different people that are there. It's a pretty good event. You know, there's a pretty good amount of people there, and enough people to um for Clark and Carol, Floyd's wife, to be out and about having a conversation and blending in, you know? And so you see Clark and Carol meeting, then it cuts to a montage of Floyd and Clark working closely, building rapport. They're doing like stretching together in like a yoga studio or something like that. They're both on mats and you know, clearly close friends. And then we cut to 6 weeks later. Floyd's stepson throwing rocks at Clark's house. They're at an event at Clark's house or just visiting perhaps, but there's, you know, multiple people there. Richard's throwing rocks at the house and Floyd's like, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you throwing rocks at the house?" So he's clearly troubled. You know, the show is really good about planting little seeds. So we're seeing these actions, we're seeing these little things, and then you're wondering like, why is he doing this? You know, and it generally, like when you see some behavior like that, is because they're missing something. It's because something's going on there, and you know, it's leading us as the audience into question like what's happening in the home, you don't type of thing, and so you know, Richard's throwing rocks at the house. Floyd and Clark sit on the swings. Clark has a swing set in his backyard. They sit on the swings. Floyd, I want to mention Clark asks, not Clark, but Floyd asks, why do you have the swing set here? It's like right by these trees, you know what I mean? Isn't that a safety hazard for your daughters? And he's like, well, no, it's in good view of my window so I can spot them from the window type of thing. And then, you know, I feel like he's doing this for he's saying this for Floyd says this for Clark to make him feel better about his decision. He's like, yeah, that's a perfect move. But in his mind, you know what I mean? Step out your house when your daughters are swinging. You know, you can watch them if you're worried about them. You know what I mean? Um, you can, so, but we'll come back to that because it does end up making sense. And so, you know, they're swinging on the swings, and Clark brings up DTF St. Louis, the name of the show. Boom, boom, boom. DTF St. Louis is a dating app, not a dating app. DTF St. Louis is a hookup app where people that are married can go no holds bars, no attachments, anything like that. Um, you reach out as a couple to find out someone that can join your relationship, or you may be the husband or the wife that just want to have a fling, and you know there's nothing attached to it after that. You don't have to hit each other up, you know what I mean? That's where it ends. And so it's enticing to, you know, people that just want to have sex for the night, don't want to have too much more than that. And I guess that's something Clark is really into, or I don't know. So he brings it up to Floyd, and Floyd's like, DTF. Clark goes, down to fuck. And the acting is brilliant. The acting is brilliant on everyone's part. But I love how David Harbour, he thinks about it. He thinks it's funny at first. You can see it in his eyes that he's like, and then he can tell that Clark is serious, and so he mulls it over. He's like, he shows some interest in it. They don't sign any dotted lines right there or whatever. um Floyd brings up the umpire. Umpire is the person that catches the ball. So you have baseball, right? You have the pitcher. The pitcher throws the ball. The batter tries to hit the ball. And when the batter doesn't get the ball, the umpire does. He's the one behind the batter. He has that weird, huge mask on so that the ball doesn't hit his face, knock his tooth out. Um, a ball has hit my face before. Pause. Um, what I want to say is, so Floyd brings up the umpire. He says her ump gear. So Carol has taken up being an umpire. Here's the thing. That is a red flag. And okay, here we go. I'm going to go on a small little rant here, but this is a huge indicator of how their marriage is in such a tough place, because if your wife does something, joins something that seems completely out of the ordinary, um, that should raise a flag. Maybe not even a red flag, but that should be cause for some questioning. You know what I mean? If your wife comes out of nowhere, hey, I want to be an umpire for baseball. You guys have never talked about baseball ever. Or maybe you have talked about baseball and she's been completely uninterested. All of a sudden she comes out one day, I want to be an umpire for this team. That should raise enough questions to be like, let me go to the first game type of thing. But he's so in his own world, aloof. That I'm saying this to say the signs were there for Floyd, and that's all I'm gonna say for now. Um, so she becomes an umpire, and he says her ump gear, uh, she'll wear it randomly, like in this scene where we're gonna get there. He talks about how they don't have sex often, and he he tries not to think of Carol in the ump gear because it's a turnoff for him. And he's been thinking about her in that ump gear. And this, we'll get there. Um, and so he's like, I'm sure I do something that turns Carol off. And then we cut to a scene where Carol's turned off by Floyd's emotion to a Batman comic. So Floyd comes in. First of all, he has the beer belly all out. You know what I mean? Not really in good shape. Comes in with the beer belly, holding a fucking Batman magazine, and he's like, "Oh my god!" He's like distressed about something, and then Carol's like, "What, honey? What's going on?" Type of thing, and then he's like, "Batman lived." And he's like really, he's like really affected by this. Batman lived. And then she's like, well, he's explaining the situation to her. He has the comic book open. She, brilliant acting. This is what I mean by, Linda kills it. And so she's kind of like, she's looking at what's causing the distress at first. She's like, what's going on? She looks, it's a comic. You can see the emotion, the worry kind of leave her face as she sees that it's a comic, and it's Batman, who he's probably brought up multiple times before. And then she looks at him and she's like, and then she checks out. You can see her check out of the conversation, but she's there. You know what I mean? She's there. That's what their marriage is at this point. Um, in that moment, you can see exactly, you know, her frustrations, her reasoning for being the umpire, for joining this. you can understand where she is with it. I'm sure many women watch that scene and they're like, ew, type of thing. But at the same time, no one's wrong here. No one's wrong in that scenario, in that specific scenario. He's not wrong for liking Batman comics. There's women out there that like comics. There's women out there that love anime. Oh, there's a bunch of women that love anime. Um, there's someone for everyone, is my point in this. Um, and the fact that she was making fun of him, it just rubbed me so wrong. I'm not into comics. I have friends that make comics, that are like awesome people. Uh, but you know, turning your nose up and that's a completely different story. You know what I mean? And I get it if that's nothing that you're interested in, you know, but you got to show some effort, especially being married to someone. Um, I feel like the idea of it can turn people off when because maybe it's because it's animated or something like that. Just something that's just so trivial, when really if you looked into it a little bit more and put aside the fact that it's a cartoon, because they're associating, I feel like a lot of grown-ups that aren't into it, and I'm not super into it, but I don't completely like, it's not disgusting to me. Like if my partner, if someone that I'm really interested in is into it, then I'm going to be watching anime. I'm going to be, reading some of the books, you know what I mean? I want to study, I want to understand where my partner, how my partner's mind works, you know what I mean? That's not a deal breaker for me. I'm definitely, especially not going to be, you know, talking about my partner like um like she did. So what she ends up doing is, you see the scene where she's like checking out once he brings the Batman comic. The next scene right after is Carol making fun of her husband with her friend. I'm assuming it's her friend. She's talking to this other lady. They have people over, and she's like, so he's like really into Batman, and he's like, oh my God, about Batman and blah, blah. And I'm like, damn, I just never want that. You know what I mean? I'm not married right now. I'm not even in a relationship right now, but you know and most of my reasoning is because I don't want to feel betrayed, you know what I mean? And that's probably trauma for me. That's probably background trauma that I'm not going to get into right now, but um just being so invested in a person, and behind your back they're doing that is, wow. Because he has no idea, but also that's a little bit on him, for not, being focused enough to notice certain things. Me, I'm a little bit different. Like anything off your baseline, I'm spotting, and that has to do with me being in behavioral health. But and just how I operated before I was even in behavioral health. But still, that it was a tough thing to watch, because it was one of my fears. One of my fears is being with someone, thinking one thing about them, and then realizing they're completely different, or they were masking who they were just to be with me. And so for me, like, an emphasis that I put on, getting into a relationship is like being yourself. And so, you don't have to like everything I like, you know what I mean? But at least tell me that you don't. So I'm not going to ask you to do these things with me, and I know that is the furthest thing from what you want to do. You're nowhere near interested in that, um or you're disgusted by it or something like that. Anyway, let's get back to it. uh then Clark says his spark. So he's still sitting on the swings with Floyd. He's going on and on about his relationship now, and he tells Floyd his spark has left in his relationship with his wife because of conflicting work schedules. So he goes to bed, his wife is up, type of thing. They're never there at the same time, awake in bed at night or whatever, to have sex. And To me, that's more of an easy fix. That's more of an easy fix. Because that just involves a little bit of scheduling. You can put in the effort because I was listening to J. Cole, and you guys may not know who this is. He's a rapper, Jermaine Cole. He's a big rapper. But you may not know who that is, especially if you're just here for acting. But one thing that you can probably resonate with, especially if you're married, is that he said something and he never says anything. Like, he just raps, and he hardly ever does interviews. But he did an interview recently, and he talked about, because he's been married to his high school sweetheart. And he talked about how love doesn't, people talk about how the love wasn't there anymore. And he says that the love is an action. You just stop doing it. You just stop putting in the effort. That's really what it was. Nothing went you just stopped putting in the effort. Maybe over time things have, disgusted you to the point where you just were turned off completely and you just stopped wanting to put in the effort. But the fact of the matter is the effort just stopped happening for whatever the reason. And we come up with those reasons, a lot of us. And I don't know, that opened my eyes. Quick side note, but we're going to get back to it. So yes, conflicting work schedules, he said, was the reasoning behind his spark leaving, quote unquote. Floyd was a little bit more optimistic. This showing us more of who he is as a person. He was like, maybe you can get that back. Maybe you can, I feel like Floyd was primed to be in a long-term relationship. He was lacking some of the skills, and who am I to say that, knowing that I'm not married right now, but like I've had, I study relationships. I study it. Like, I want to show up to the best of my ability. And like a thing that I feel like I know is that you have to be aware. You have to be aware of your partner. You have to pay attention and know what's going to piss them off. Know the things that make them happy. You got to be an observer and someone that takes action. You can't just observe, because in my own experience, that's what I've done, where I'm just observing and I know, but I'm not making any action, and I'm just kind of watching things fall apart sometimes. And it's big, I'm not going to get into that. But that's something that I've worked on. And so, Floyd was optimistic. He was like, maybe you guys can find that again. And Clark skips he ignores that basically, and he nudges Floyd back towards DTF St. Louis. The title of the show, the app to get you some. And in that moment, Floyd was like, I it's game night, because the way that Clark does it is he's like, let's go to Outback Steakhouse and talk a little bit more about DTF St. Louis. Floyd goes, nah, it's game night. I kind of want to, chill with the family, be around my family. That's where my mind's at right now. And Clark's like, Clark goes, headbands. Headbands is a great game. You guys will love it, type of thing. Floyd, he gets excited. He goes to whatever retail store, and he goes and picks up the game. Yeah. As he goes and picks up the game, this is an important part, because this was, to me, a statement of their financial position. So Floyd goes to the retail store. He gets the game. He pays for this game. Mind you, headbands, depending on where you're at in the country, it could be anywhere from 18, could be less, $30, I'm going to say max. I don't know, maybe more if you're in Cali or New York. He does it on a split transaction. He's like, can you put some on this card and put the other on that card. It declined the first card and then it worked on the next card. And big whoop, but whatever. But to me, everything that you see, everything that's going on inside the thing that you're watching is for a purpose. There's nothing in that film that passed the verification of everybody that created it, the producers, whatever. There's nothing in the film that's for no reason. So you're watching that, or I'm watching that, and I'm saying, oh, so they have money issues. Because that's where it ended. You know, he was able to get it. He purchased it. They went off. That was fine. And to me, that's just a statement of where they're at financially. Boom, we're moving on. So he gets the headbands game, comes back home. The stepson is throwing rocks at their house now. And then Floyd's like, "You're throwing rocks at our place now?" He's like, "Well, yeah." This fucking teenager, bro. Like, he's, oh my goodness. The kid, but also that's a statement of something's going on, something's happening, you know, within the home. And um so then we go to Clark swinging on the swing set, and we get a little insight to why Clark swings on the swing set. Clark swinging back and forth and this and that. We see a hot, apparently she's made out to be hot teen. She's like on the back on a yoga mat in the yard. She's, good shape, very petite. Looks way too young for Clark, but he's just swinging on the swing, kind of just watching her like a creepy predator. She's not noticing that he's watching or anything. She doesn't turn around. She doesn't wink, anything like that. He's just watching her. You know what I mean? Which is, yeah. Anyway, so a little more insight into Clark. Wandering eyes, you know what I mean? This man is married as well. But he did say that he's having some things with his wife, but like, those are things you don't just talk about it, communicate, people. Anyway, then we go to Floyd. Floyd's playing headbands with the family. It's not as great as he wants it to be. I'm sure he has this idea in his mind of how this game's gonna go with his family. They're gonna have fun. It's only 3 of them. Um, Carol showed up. Carol showed up to the game. Maybe there's a spark that happens during the game, whatever. But instead, there's some friction between Richard and Floyd. They're going on about how they're playing the game and stuff like that, and he doesn't get it right. Floyd doesn't get it right for whatever the reason. I forgot what it was. But, Richard's like, "You lost, blah, blah, blah." And Floyd's like, "I lost because you didn't, blah, blah, blah," and this and that. And then, that there's a little tension there. They go after the game, post game. Carol and Floyd are in the kitchen, they're talking. Carol is checked out, you know what I mean? It's passive, and it's one of those it's passive to where she's not trying to get his attention, that she's being passive. It's a dangerous passive. This kind of passive aggression is when you're fed up, when you're done. You know what I mean? You can be passive and try to, because your partner knows you, they're going to pick up on those social cues and they're going to be like, "Babe, for real? Like, what's going on? Are you mad at me?" type of thing. But because he doesn't pick up on those social cues, and it's just like incompatibility between the two, and also just lack of communication, because people can't read your mind. If you tell him this and this and this and this, like, you're mad when you do this, that means you're blah 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 and this and that, then he can pick up, like, he's following your cues. If you've never told him, because you don't know how to communicate when you're upset, then you run into these issues where you've been building all this frustration without this man knowing that you're building it. Let me stop siding right now. At least until you guys know why I'm doing that. But so they're going on, about that. She's very passive. Floyd comes in the room. Next scene, he sees her legs. She's sitting on the bed. He sees her legs. They're beautiful. I'm not a leg guy. Whatever. Those are legs. But you know, they're beautiful legs. You know, they're hanging off the bed. He's like, he takes a moment and just watches the legs, and it was just him like, damn, that's my wife right there. He starts moving a little bit closer. She gets up, and the top half has a jersey and an umpire gear on. Ew, bruh. Like, what? She picked, and she, anyway. No, that is, anyway. Wow. And so she says she has like 2 games that she has to umpire tonight, whatever, whatever. You know, Floyd contemplates. You can see him contemplating. He's like sitting on their outside pool in the backyard. This is, you know, after she's left at this point, obviously. And then he calls Clark. He's like, you know, let's talk more about that DTF St. Louis. You know what I mean? Anyway, Floyd with Clark, they're at Outback Steakhouse. You know, he took him up on the offer, and he creates a profile on DTF St. Louis with Clark. It's hilarious. He's going on about how he's open, he's kind, blah, 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 blah. He says, pretty good shape. And then he looks at Clark. He's like, pretty good shape, right? Like I'm in pretty good shape. Not good shape, but you know, pretty good. You know? And the acting by Clark, Jason Bateman playing Clark, he goes, you know what you should say? Cares about health. Cares about health. And, you know, he thinks about it. He thinks about it for a second. He's like, you know, all right, that sounds like I'm in good shape, even when I'm not. And it's true, you know, cares about health. Afterwards, they're shown cutscene. They're in the bathroom. They're peeing together, kind of laughing, joking about it. DTF St. Louis, blah, blah, blah. We just did it. We just created the profile, blah, blah, blah. We made that step. Then we cut to, and also that was a sign showing, that was a statement of their closeness. Like they're close dudes. Like they're friends. You know what I mean? And then, you know, we cut to 8 weeks later. Floyd is found dead in a pool, community pool. So we zoom in, we see the pool, we see the building, we go into the building, we see Floyd, who is sitting with his back up against like the front desk area, and he's eyes are open, but he's gone, you know, blue in the face type of thing. This is when we get an introduction. We get an introduction to Richard Jenkins. Richard Jenkins is so funny. Like when I think of Richard Jenkins at this point, I think of Step Brothers. When he was the, you know, the dad. Richard Jenkins is hilarious, my guy. Like his acting is spot on. He has such a feel for it. So yeah, Richard Jenkins is the St. Louis County detective. His name in this is Donahue Homer. And then you have the special crimes agent, Twyla, played by Jody Plum. This was the first thing that I've seen her in. She's amazing. She's amazing. They in this opening scene, they battle over jurisdiction. So the crime is kind of like based in St. Louis County, but the victim and the perpetrator live in Twyla in Missouri. And so special crimes, Jody Plum from Twyla, they both kind of come up with an agreement to collaborate, and with with Donahue taking point. So we see a naked man on a magazine found by Donahue, naked, like penis out and everything. Like, where? I don't want to see it. Anyway, um, then we cut to a shot of Carol. Then we cut to a shot of Clark doing the weather, and then it's Donahue boiling it down to a heart attack. He's basically saying, all right, he was reading this porn mag, he was just watching it. He had a heart attack because blood overflow to the heart type of thing, atrial, ventral, blah, 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 blah. And then he died. And Jody, her response to that was, I'm porn positive. She said, I'm porn positive. Porn is a part of my marital sex life. That's not porn. Like, he's not even hard type of thing, is what she was saying. So her and her husband watch porn all the time is basically what she was saying. And like, this is not a porn. This is more like a collectible. Donahue, seasoned vet, wasn't trying to hear all that. But he was like, and so he boiled it down to just being gay on the low. And Donahue was like, the quote he said was, he should be able to be himself in his house. You shouldn't have to get up so early to be you. Should be an all day sort of thing. That I agree with. Aside from, being homosexual, I'm not. Being bisexual, I'm not on the low or anything like that. But, having things that you hide from your partner about yourself because you don't feel comfortable enough to say it to your partner is something that I'm not at all interested in, and might be why I'm single right now, because I haven't met someone to where I was like, all right, I feel like I could tell her this, you know what I mean? And not like I have any dark secrets type of thing, but you know what I mean? I have some things where it's like, that's not something that comes up in everyday conversation. You know what I mean? Like, that's not. And so, yeah, it's a huge thing to me. That was a quote that stood out, and it was like, yeah, that's something that I want to highlight and bring up because, regardless of a lot of the other stuff, it and regardless of the fact that that may not even be right, like he could be wrong. We're gonna get to whether he was right or wrong, but what he was saying, assuming that might have been what happened, he was right. He was right about that dynamic in relationships. So moving on. Um, the thing that he was watching, the page that you'll see if you watch the show, and I recommend that you do. It's like a Indiana Porns cosplay. He's wearing the fedora. And that's all he's wearing. He's naked. He's ass naked. Um, Gay Indiana Jones porn. So after that, cut to Jody. Jody's at home with her husband Glenn. Glenn is an Asian guy, which let me shout out. Let me shout out POC in film, TV, with POC, like you have a black person and an Asian person together. Normally it's black, white, black, black, Asian, white, Asian, black, Asian, you know what I mean? Not Asian, black. But so this was new to me to see like different people of color in a relationship together. I'm not even gonna get into what I'm working on. But anyway, so that was cool to see. I just like to point that out. Yeah, her husband's name's Glenn. they're looking at different Indiana Jones gay porn, and they're like, look, they're having sex. Like it's in his blood right now. You know what I mean? Anyway, um, and so she, we're seeing her question Donahue's summation of the events. She's like, I'm just not. Something doesn't feel right about it, type of thing. And then we cut to a scene where Carol's running down the street. She's a jogger. She's a runner. She's a long distance runner. But the body type, you could tell, long distance runner. Um, and we can hear the audiobook that she's listening to as she's running, and the voice in the audiobook. I saved this quote. They say, "Asking someone to speak up when you can hear them is a means of controlling the conversation and throwing the other person from their preferred dialogue rhythms." Immediately when I heard that scene, I was like, this is interesting. Why is she listening to this? Anyway, um, and so Clark, there's a Clark montage doing the weather and watching his neighbor and the other, showing, some insight to who he is. And then we see Jody doing investigative work. She's like talking to people that own this place, that place, who have security cameras in the area around the pool that Floyd was found at. And we see a shot of Clark's unique nerd bike on a security cam footage 2 blocks from the community pool. It's like a well, I say nerd bike because I'm quoting what they say in the show. Like, to me, it's not. I mean, I guess. He got the helmet on and everything. It's like one of those bikes that you sit on, tricycle type thing. You sit on and you just, yeah, man, a little, a little different. Um, so we see him on the footage 2 blocks from the community pool, and then we cut to Donahue authorizes Jody to find out. And when I say authorize, she basically shows that camera footage. I don't believe she shows it to him, but she tells Donahue that she sees camera footage of Clark near the community pool, and not Clark per se, but she goes up to a bike. Oh, no, yeah, she does say that she saw the bike near the community pool. What Detective Donahue says is, all right, you can look into the bike sellers in the area and see who sold that type of bike. So he authorized it. And it was a big deal. She was like, "Are you authorizing me to do that?" And he was like, "Yeah, I guess I am," type of thing. So she goes to a bike seller. The bike seller says he's only sold 2 of those bikes, and he sold 2 of them to the same person, which is Clark Forrest. She tells Detective Donahue. Detective Donahue talks to Clark. Before he does that, he gets Floyd's laptop. He goes through Floyd's laptop. He's seeing a bunch of stuff. So then he questions Clark afterwards. He asks Clark to go to the station. He meets Clark. I think it's backstage in the weather building or whatever, the news building, and then they meet in the lobby at the jail. Asks Clark about different things, about Clark riding the nerd bike. Oh, Clark rides the nerd quote unquote nerd bike to the station, and then he questions him, and there's no real pressure, but he is kind of asking questions. The way that Richard Jenkins played this is amazing. So smooth how he did his first interview, I thought. And then um before Clark leaves, another agent walks up to Clark and um hands him court documents, basically stating that they get to keep his cell phone and they get to go through his text and they get to go through his emails. And you see Clark kind of contemplating and he's processing all this and he's like, this says you get to do that? And then Donahue's like, yeah. And it was just so clean how he did it. Anyway, so we see Clark riding home on his nerd bike, and we see his flashbacks with Floyd doing sign language together, and he's saying something that clearly changes Floyd saying something that clearly changes Clark's mood. We don't know what he's saying yet because there's no subtitles. He's signing it. And then Donahue gets Clark's text, Clark and Carol's affair. Boom. Clark and Carol. Clark and Floyd's wife were having an affair. The texts show that she wanted things to go back to normal with her husband, quote unquote. And he, quote unquote, didn't want to accept that. So they were having an affair. Carol apparently wanted things to go back to normal. And Clark was like, not trying to have that. You know what I mean? The toxicology report came back of a lethal dose of a pharmaceutical drug, emphysine. Donahue explains that to Jody. Jody and Donahue are having another conversation. There's a montage of flashbacks for Clark. Police then detain Clark live on the air. Like Clark is giving a weather a weather report, and Donahue shows up. And this tells me a little bit about Donahue. Because he could have waited. He could have waited until the report was done. You can't get out. He brought a whole squad with him. You know what I mean? He could have waited for the weather report to be done, but he decided to insert himself on the camera and tell Clark, come here. Like put the handcuffs on him on camera, live on the air. And that, I don't know, that told me a little bit about who his character is. Him wanting to take the case from Jody, him wanting to lead the case with Jody, a little bit of ego, maybe a lot of bit of ego. The fact that he's arresting him live on the air when he could have waited. He could have waited. You know what I mean? He ain't going nowhere. Tells me a little bit about the character, but it's okay. I don't mind the character too much. And so, yeah. Toxicology report, like I said, police detain Clark live on the air. He also read his rights on the air. That could have been checks and balances for him. That could have been a liability thing where he's like, look, I said it. Everybody heard me say it on the air. And then we go to the jail. We see Clark, in the holding cell. And basically what he says was, I'm not afraid to talk to you. I'm not afraid to talk to you. Basically, I love that man that died, and I'm not afraid. And Detective Donahue's like, all right, so what happened? Where did this all come from? And Clark goes, cornhole. That's all he says at first. He's like, cornhole, where the events began. And then we go back to that scene where they're having that community dinner, and Clark meets Carol. And then we go back to that scene where they're doing the where Floyd and Clark are stretching or whatever on the yoga mats, and he signs to him where we didn't see any subtitles before. Now we see the subtitles, and he goes, "I know that you are fucking my wife. I know that you are fucking my wife." Damn. Scene, episode 1 ends.